All right, guys, today what we're going to do is we're going to warm up. We're going to do a few warm-up problems before our quiz. And just to change it up a little bit, instead of printing off sheets for you or things, I do have the whiteboards up front. So I need you to grab a whiteboard, a marker, and one of the little eraser deals. All right, the questions that we're going to warm up with, I'm going to have them increase in difficulty just like your quiz will. So hopefully you'll try these out. The questions that we're going to work through on here are going to be just like your quiz, not the exact questions. One suggestion for you, you might want to turn your whiteboard so it's more of that portrait feel, because I know some of these will take a little more work than others. Or, you know, we have our positive case, negative case, so you might need to do a little more writing. If you write small, that landscape sideways deal will be okay, but just a suggestion so you don't get frustrated, like, oh man, I can't fit everything on one question. All right, so let us try out. Let's start off what hopefully should be I'm going to start off as easy as I can. Absolute value of x, I'm going to put a little number 1 by this. Absolute value of x equals 3. See what you can do to solve it. See what you can do to solve it. I can't get them any easier than this one. Now, some of us yesterday, I know, did all the practice. You check things like, oh, I'm feeling good about this. This is a simple one. Some of us chose yesterday to sit there and do nothing. We sat there and played on our phones, whatever the case may be. If you weren't here, then I would definitely tune into this because, guys, we're running out of days. We're running out of days. It can't be, oh, I'll make that up some other time. We have 2 class days left. That's it. So we don't have a lot of time to make things up. All right, so this one, if you have half a clue what you're doing, should be done by now. So, when we have absolute value, remember, our first goal is we need to get the absolute value bars by themselves. In this one, that's already done, because all we have is absolute value of x. Then we talked about yesterday that 2 different numbers have the same absolute value. 2 different numbers have the same absolute value. That would be, in this case, the absolute value of 3 will give me 3. The absolute value of negative 3 will also give me 3. So once you have the absolute value bars by themselves, there might just be an x in there. There could be some other stuff, and we'll see that in just a minute. Once you have it by itself, take whatever's inside the bars, whether it's just an x or whether it's a whole expression, set it equal to, in this case, positive 3. Set it equal to the negative of that same number. Positive 3 and negative 3 both have the same absolute value, which is 3. Remember, absolute value is a distance from 0. Now, if I wanted to, I know this one's pretty basic, but if I wanted to check, I sure can. The first few we do in our warm-up today, I will check with you, just to kind of get you thinking, hey, I might want to do this on my quiz to know if I have 100% before I turn it in. That'd be pretty cool. All right, so we have, here's our check. I'm going to check 3 first. Absolute value of 3. Again, absolute value is the distance we are from 0. So 3 is 3 spaces from 0. That one checks. We check negative 3 next. Absolute value of negative 3, again, is just 3. Negative 3 is also 3 spaces from 0. It's 3 away from 0. It's a distance. So this first one I wanted to start as basic as we possibly could, just as that reminder of we do have 2 solutions. Okay, I know we don't have the graph staring us in the face like we did yesterday and a few classes before that. We don't have that graph there, but I wanted to start with just a reminder, we do have those two solutions. Okay, let's take it up just a notch. Let's take it up just a notch. Let's do the absolute value. Let's do x plus 4. And let's say that it equals 2. Absolute value of x plus 4 equals 2. Try it out, and then I will go through it with you. Try it out. Do what you think, and then I will go through it.
You wait, Steve.
And remember, we want to do this without the graphing. Some of us are trying to sketch different graphs of things. We want to be able to do this without the graphing piece. I know the ones we do, I keep it pretty basic. So like, Miss Kelly, but graphing will work. I can graph this. I know it goes left 4. But not everything we solve is going to be this nice perfect thing to graph. So I want to do the algebraic part. I want to keep the equations simple because we're just being introduced to this in this course. All right, so before we can solve, we need those absolute value bars all by themselves. Do we already have that?
No.
Yeah. I know some of you are thinking, oh, wait, there's that plus 4, but the plus 4 is inside. So the absolute value bars are by themselves. There's nothing in front of them. There's nothing added or subtracted off the end that's not being divided by anything. The absolute value bars are all alone hanging out on that left side. Once the absolute value bars are all by themselves, now we have to start thinking about, there's going to be two possibilities. Possibility number 1 is that whatever's inside the bars, that whole expression, if I can get that whole expression to equal positive 2, we're in good shape. Because the absolute value of 2 is 2. But now we just saw in that first problem that more than one number will have an absolute value of 2. What's the other number that has an absolute value of 2? Negative 2. So that means that if I can get that expression inside those absolute value bars to also be negative 2, I'm in good shape. I need to get whatever's inside the bars to either equal 2, so that when we take the absolute value, we get 2, or we need whatever's inside the bars to equal negative 2, so the absolute value again is 2. Now I just have a couple easy one-step equations to solve. I need to get x by itself in this first one. So to do that, I just subtract 4. I saw some of us dividing by 4. Some of us were trying to multiply by 4. We're doing some goofy things with that 4. Go back to what you know. You guys knew how to solve equations before we even started this school year. You guys knew that from last year. You knew how to undo addition. You know how to undo subtraction. You know how to do those things. You know how to solve an equation. We're adding that new absolute value piece in there. So we do the same thing to the other one. So x equals negative 6. Now I want to make sure we're right. I said for the first couple I was going to check with you. I want to make sure that we are right. So I'm going to check x equals negative 2 first. So I have an absolute value bar. Instead of x, I'm going to put negative 2. We have the plus 4 in there. And we want the end result to be 2. So again, I took our original, and instead of x, I substituted in negative 2, because that's what we think one of the solutions is. I do whatever's inside the absolute value bars first before I even think about finding the absolute value. So negative 2 plus 4 is going to give me 2. Absolute value of 2, how far are we from 0? We're 2 away. The first one checks. Now, just because the first one checks doesn't necessarily mean automatically that you got the second one right, too. I can get the first one right, and I can make a mistake solving that second case. So make sure you check both. So we have our absolute value bars again, and this time we're checking negative 6. So negative 6 plus 4, we get the negative 2 that we had talked about earlier. Absolute value of negative 2. So how far away from 0 is negative 2? It's 2 spots. 2 equals 2. And we check. And we check. So now the first 2, again, just like your quiz, I'm going to keep them pretty basic, and then I'm going to start getting a little tougher as we go. The first 2 are about as basic as we can get because the absolute value bars are already by themselves. We just need to do our positive case, negative case. Now let's crank things up just a bit. Let's crank things up just a bit. Go number 3. And you don't have to keep all these on your board, guys. You can erase each time. Some of you are trying to cram all these on your board. You're not going to turn your board into me. You can just erase each time. All right, so let's go with absolute value of x minus 3 equals, let's go with negative 1. See what you can do for this one. I want to give you a chance first. You guys did have an opportunity, a lot of opportunity yesterday to practice these, so let's see what you've got. All right, I'm seeing some really good starts as I walk around. And I'm seeing some of us that are finished. And some of us that all we have written on our whiteboard right now is the problem itself. So if you haven't gotten started yet, that means you probably need me to help you get started. So in the first 2 problems we did, I still have them up on the screen for you. Absolute value bars were already by themselves. So we just needed to do the positive possibility and the negative possibility. Now in number 3, again, increase the level of difficulty a little bit. The absolute value bars are not by themselves. I need to get them there before I can consider the positive or the negative cases. So how am I going to get those absolute value bars all by themselves? What do I need to do? You add the 3. You add the 3 to both sides. To undo subtraction, we use addition. To undo subtraction, we use addition. And again, don't do anything unusual because, oh my gosh, there's absolute value bars there. Use the properties we've been using all year that you used last year and probably the year before. So I'm going to add the 3 to both sides, which means on the left side, I just have the absolute value of x left. Then on the right side, I have negative 1 plus 3. and I end up with a 2. I'm not finished. Just because I added the 3 over it doesn't mean absolute value bars disappear too. I still have the absolute value bars. I haven't done anything yet with those. So now the absolute value of x, I need it to equal 2. Well, we know that two different numbers are going to work there. Positive 2, its absolute value is 2. And negative 2, its absolute value is also 2. So we need two different possibilities each time. We need two different solutions each time. And you guys saw that. We started solving these with graphs. And we saw that V-shaped absolute value graph intersect that horizontal line in two places. We had two solutions every time. So when I walked around, some of you just had x equals 2 on your boards. That's great that we're getting to that point, but it's not a plain x we're solving for. It's an absolute value of x. So we need all the possibilities. All right, let's crank it up just a little bit more. Let's crank it up just a little bit more. Let's go absolute value. Let's go x minus 1 plus 4 equals 8. Let's see what you can do with this one. And if the first few, if you really just needed those first couple to warm up and kind of get your brain going like, oh yeah, there's two cases, okay. So now try this one. If you think you're finished and you only have x equals, and there's just one number, think about the case you might be missing. Saw a lot of really, really good first steps. A lot of really, really good first steps. I see a lot of you knowing I've got to clear that 4 out of there. To undo addition, I'm seeing a lot of people subtracting 4 as their first step, and that's exactly what you need to do. Priority 1, get the absolute value bars by themselves. And that's what a lot of you did, and that's awesome first step. Now that absolute value bars are by themselves, a lot of us are getting two solutions, but we're not quite there with the right way of how to get it. As soon as I have the absolute value bars by themselves, that expression inside of those bars, if it equals positive 4, we're in good shape. If the expression inside the bars equals positive 4, we're in great shape because the absolute value of 4 is 4. Now the other solution, though, comes from taking what's inside the bars, taking that x minus 1, and I need to get it to equal negative 4. When I walked around, some of us were just setting up this first case, solving it, and then making it a plus minus. You need both situations. The answer to this problem is not positive 5 and negative 5. Positive 5 is one of them, because when I solve, When I solve this first case, I add 1 to both sides, and I do get positive 5. But I don't just take that positive 5 and then make that negative and call it a day. I need that other case. I need what's inside the bars. I need that x minus 1 to equal negative 4 somehow. In order to do that, it's going to take x equals negative 3. So as I walked around, a lot of us did have 2 solutions, but make sure you went about it the right way. You need that expression inside the absolute value bars to equal positive 4, and then you need the expression inside the absolute value bars to then equal negative 4. You can't just solve one of the cases and end up throwing a negative sign on it. You need those 2 separate ones. So this one's a little more complex, so I want to make sure we go through how to check. I want to make sure we go through how to check again. And then we're going to do a couple more together again, a couple more that are a little more difficult. And then hopefully you're ready to quiz. Hopefully it's warmed you up to a point where you're like, yep, I'm good with this. So let's go ahead and check. Let's go ahead and check. I'm going to start with 5. So again, I go back to my original. So I have an absolute value bar. Instead of x, I'm going to put a 5. We have the minus 1 plus 4, and we want to see if that equals 8. I need to do the subtracting inside the absolute value bars first. So 5 minus 1 gives me a 4. Absolute value of 4 is 4. And then lastly, I finally get to do the 4 plus 4, and I get 8. The first one checks. But again, make sure your second one checks also. Because when I walked around, some of you had for your final answer positive 5, and then you just threw a negative sign on it and said, yep, negative 5 is my other one. You didn't even do this negative case. You just threw a negative sign on your answer and said, yep, it looks good. So let's check the negative 3. In for x goes negative 3. I have to do the subtracting inside the bars first before I can do the absolute value. So negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. And remember, just because I did the subtraction doesn't mean the absolute value bars are gone. They're still there. I didn't find the absolute value yet. Absolute value of negative 4 is 4. And again, we get 4 plus 4 is 8. So they both check. If you were one of my people that put 5 and then negative 5 as a solution, if you tried negative 5 in there, it's not going to work. 5 will work, but negative 5 won't. So be careful on that. Be careful on that. All right, there's one of the operations that we have not checked out yet. Squeezing it over here, we'll go number 5. Number 5, let's go 2 times the absolute value of x minus 3, and that equals 7. See what you can do with this one. I'll give you a few minutes to play around with this one. This is one we haven't warmed up with yet. We've got a 2 in front of the absolute value bars. I want to see what you do with that first. Try it out. You've got a whiteboard in front of you. It's very easy to erase that. Alright guys, it looks like some of us are definitely getting warmed up here. It's awesome to see. So a lot of really good first steps again. Looks like we're all clicking with the idea of I've got to get those absolute value bars by themselves first. So in order to do that, what's the first step that we take? Add 3. Add 3. So that means I still have 2 times the absolute value of x, and now it's going to equal 10. Now as I walked around, I saw some different things being done with that 2. Overall though, I saw the right thing being done with that 2. That 2 is right next to those absolute value bars. If that 2 is right next to it, that means we're multiplying. How do we undo multiplying? We divide. We divide by 2. Now again, dividing by that 2, guys, we haven't done anything to get rid of those absolute value bars. They're sticking there. So to undo that 2, to undo that multiplication, we've got to divide by 2. Now my absolute value bars are all by themselves. So that means if I can get what's inside those bars to be positive 5, we're in good shape. If I can get what's inside those bars to be negative 5, we're in great shape too. So if there's just an x inside your absolute value bars, yeah, your final answer, it's going to be the same number, just opposite sign. But if you have something else added or subtracted in there, you've got to do a little extra work. Okay? Let's try. I've got space for 2 more. I've got space for 2 more. So let's do number 6. I'm going to squeeze it in right here, guys. Let's do, see, negative 4, negative 1/2. Try this one out. If you can do this one, nothing on the quiz is going to slow you down. If you can do this one, nothing on the quiz is going to slow you down. I know some of you aren't going to like that the absolute value bars are over on the right. You can switch the equation around if that bugs you. I see some of us are debating which thing to start with. Do I start with the negative 1/2 or do I start with the negative 2? The negative 1/2 is next to those absolute value bars. The negative 1/2 is being multiplied right now. The 2 is being subtracted. We want to do any adding or subtracting first. So I just want to make sure your first step is okay. Then I want to give you a few more minutes. I know some of you are still working your way through this one. but you do want to add the 2 first. You don't want to add the 1/2 because that's actually being multiplied by those absolute, whatever's in that absolute value. If you're sitting there and you're finished, take a minute and check it, even if it's a mental check. I know there's not a lot of room on your whiteboard, so there'll be plenty of room on your quiz to check. All right, so to undo that negative 1/2 that we're multiplying by, we've got to divide. Negative divided by negative, it's going to give us a positive. We're going to get a positive 4. And our absolute value bars are now all by themselves. So we take what's inside the bars, set it equal to positive 4. We take what's inside the bars and we set it equal to negative 4. Positive case, negative case. Subtract our 1. Whoops, sorry guys. We don't need that. There we go. Subtract our 1. We get 3 equals x. And we get negative 5 equals x. We get our 2 solutions. I said I wanted to do 2 more before that last one there, so I do want to do 1 more. And I know I'm almost out of space here. And it's about time for our quiz. I want to make sure you have enough time. So we have, let's go with let's just try out this one last one, and then we'll get you going on your quiz. Now I know some of you are thinking, Ms. Holly, you said put that number 6, so you said if we could do that one, we could do any of them. Why do we need to do 1 more? Well, this one, it's not any more difficult than any of the ones we've been doing. We want to subtract our 2. We have negative 3 times the absolute value of x equals positive 3. I wanted to make sure we did 1 more where we had to divide before we could think about our 2 cases. I get the absolute value of x equals negative 1. No matter how hard I try, I cannot find a number to put in for x so that the absolute value is going to be negative 1. It's not going to happen. Absolute value is the distance we are from 0. Distance can't be negative. Whether we're moving forward or backwards, it doesn't matter. Whether the car's in drive or the car's in reverse. Whether we run the mile forwards or we try to run it backwards, it's still a mile. It's not a negative mile. So this one is a no solution. Absolute value cannot equal a negative. Now this is when it's super important, because I saw some of you that had positive 1 and negative 1 written down as solutions. This is where you definitely need to check. I'm a little out of space. I'm going to go over here. If I try to put 1 in for x, because I saw some of you that had 1 and negative 1 as solutions. If I try to put 1 in for x, I get negative 3, the absolute value of 1 is 1, plus 2. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. I get negative 1 equals 5. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. So if you're worried about, oh, Miss Golly, yeah, that's right, absolute value can't equal to negative, but I wrote down 1 and negative 1 as my answers, then make sure you check. I wanted to throw this last one in here as an even more important reason for you to actually check your answers. Okay? So the variety of questions we saw is what you're going to see on your quiz. Your quiz is 8 problems. They range in difficulty just like we saw these 7 problems. Could there be a no solution? There could be a no solution, and I just want to double check here real quick for you. There can be a no solution. There's at most, just so you don't go through and like write down no solution for half the problems, there's at most 2 of them. At most 2, I will tell you that. So there might not be any, there might be 1, there might be 2. There will not be more than 2 that are no solution. So if you're going through and, oh, first one didn't work, no solution, the number 2 you decide doesn't work, you're probably making mistakes somewhere else. Okay? There's at most 2 that are no solution on your quiz. So go ahead, guys, clear off your desks. Sit so you're not right next to somebody. You can put your whiteboard stuff away, please. Grab a calculator if you want one. And let's do this.